Hi everybody, my name is Ria Alfaro and I'm the music librarian for Fort Worth Public Library. And today I'm doing an interview with one of our performers for this month, the Spectrum Chamber Music Society. Hi everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you guys like to go around and introduce yourselves and talk about your instruments and then kind of what you guys have in store for us this month?
Sure. My name is Dan Seigel. I am a violist. And I'm the director of Spectrum Chamber Music Society, which we're now headed into our 35th season. I also play in the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra. Spectrum features Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra musicians, and we also have friends of ours, friends of symphony members come in, or in this case, a spouse, because Laura is our cellist for this program is not a member of the symphony, but she subbed with us. So that's who I am.
Okay, now it's my turn. My name is Laura Ospina. I'm a cellist. I was born in Colombia. I'm from South America. And I play in different orchestras. I sub with the Fort Worth Symphony. I'm the principal cellist of the Las Colinas Symphony. And I also play with East Texas Symphony in Tyler.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Ivan. I play the clarinet. I'm from Italy, and I play with the Fort Worth Symphony, and I also have the pleasure to play with the Spectrum Chamber Music Society quite a bit, and I'm her husband.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you guys for being able to join me today. One of the first questions, we have a variety of questions that people were kind of sending in to ask you guys. So answer these, I guess, to the best of your ability if you can. But one of the first questions was kind of, how did you fall into this career path? How did you first discover music? And how did you decide that this was going to be your main gig in life?
Who starts?
Who wants to?
You guys feel free.
Yeah.
Laura, you raised your hand so politely.
So I'm in my family, my father, my mom used to sing in a choir, in the school choir, the college choir. And that was my beginning in music. So I started there. They put me in music classes. And when I was, I think, 14 years old, I started with the cello. And then when I finished my bachelor, I decided to, no bachelor, my high school, I decided to go with the cello. It was risky because, you know, Colombia is, it is a difficult country to survive. And as a musician, you know, family was concerned, but it was good for me. I became a principal cellist in the National Orchestra there, and it was a good decision. I love it. I still love it.
I started when I was about 8 years old in the wind symphony, in the band of my town, and then I played by myself, self-taught for a few years, and then I found a teacher, Francesco Belli, that is a very good friend of mine, and he is an inspiration, and I basically fall in love with music and with the clarinet, and here I am.
Welcome.
My story begins when I was 4 years old. I have an older brother who played the cello, and anything that he did, I wanted to do. So I took up violin, and I had been playing for about 10 years, and I wasn't as motivated as I should have been on the violin. And my high school orchestra teacher needed a principal violist. So for those of you who don't know, the violin and the viola are similar, but slightly different. You play them both on your shoulder. The viola is a little bit longer and a little bit deeper. So he needed a principal viola a year from that point, and he asked me if I would be interested in switching so that I could become principal viola. And I took to the viola in a way that I hadn't taken to the violin. think a lot of violists say that the viola chose them rather than they chose the viola. And I don't know if that's true in my case or not, but it certainly motivated me. And I started to get into all state orchestras and youth orchestra, Chicago Youth Symphony Orchestra. I'm from the Chicago area. And because of that change to viola, that's why I have a career in music. If I had been playing violin, there's no way that I would be here speaking to you today. So I'm very, very thankful to my high school orchestra teacher for giving me the opportunity that turned into a career.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know that was one of the other questions was how did you choose your instrument, or how did your instruments find you guys?
Do you guys want to talk about that?
I wanted to play the sax when I was a kid, but then somebody told me, oh, who can play the clarinet can play also the sax, can switch to the sax easy. Meanwhile, whoever plays the sax can't switch so easy to the clarinet. So why don't you start on the clarinet? And obviously in the band they needed more clarinets. So I picked out the clarinet and I stayed with the clarinet.
Yeah, in my case, it was this little orchestra when I was, and I started with percussion and things, and then one day they said, well, violin, because you know when kids start with violin, how awful it could sound, you know. I like the idea, and also I'm almost 6 feet tall, so the teachers show me the cello like, I think this is what you should go, and I did, and I love it.
Funny story, when I got my first violin at age 4, we thought, and I remember this, I actually have a memory of this, we thought that it was going to be this screechy, scratchy sound that was going to be horrible. And I drew the bow across the string for the first time, the best that I could, and there was no sound whatsoever. And we were like, what is going on here?
When you were a violist.
What's that? This was when I was a violinist. Hold on. But wait, but that was the day that we discovered rosin, which is what you put on the bow to make it stick to the string and actually get the sound out of the instrument. So once we rosined the bow, then the squeaky sound began. So, but it was interesting that we were completely taken by surprise at the beginning.
I will say I had to learn, I did music education in school, so I had to learn how to play all the instruments, including strings. And we talk about beginners and that screeching sound. That was pretty much what I had that entire semester, that entire year that I played all string instruments. So I'm definitely a woodwind player. That's that's what we discovered. Yes. So my next question for you guys would be, so you were mentioning that you guys don't all play for Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, or you sub for it, but how did you become members of Spectrum? How did you kind of get into it, or how does anybody get into Spectrum?
So I've been with the Fort Worth Symphony since 1998. I joined when I was 7. Just kidding. But I joined in 1998. And I found out about this chamber music series. And one thing that I had wanted to do with my career was to get into an orchestra that also had a chamber music series. I knew I wanted to do both. Violists love chamber music. It's really one of the best opportunities for us to shine. So when I got to the Fort Worth Symphony and I found out that Spectrum existed, even though Spectrum isn't officially part of the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, I was so excited that it was an opportunity for me to get to do both. And one of the great things about Spectrum, and I'm sure the guys will tell you about this, the others, is that we can go to the person in charge. At the time, the director, I could go to him and I would say, I want to play this piece, and I have these other musicians that are going to play it with me, and they would program it. And that's what we do to this day. We crowdsource a lot of our Spectrum concerts, and people, I kind of think of Spectrum as like a bucket list chamber music ensemble, because it's an opportunity to play pieces that you would probably never get to play anywhere else. And that's one of the things that's special about Spectrum.
He said it all.
That was it. That was it.
He entered the orchestra and started to play, and then
And then I met them.
yeah, they met and they invited me.
Perfect.
And we
So,
fell in love, and we've been in love ever since, right, Ivan?
Oh yeah.
He's like a brother to me.
Oh, precious. So one of the other questions that people were asking was a differentiation between like an orchestra, a symphony. What's the difference with that, and then a chamber ensemble?
Doctor, that's the best thing that can happen to a musician.
Doctor, yeah.
So in the chamber music, basically, the chamber music is for smaller ensembles. And most of the time, we don't need a conductor. Well, when you play in an orchestra or you play for a conductor, you are basically a part of a big instrument that is the orchestra. And the conductor is the one playing it, is the one with the ideas. Mm-hmm. In chamber music, everyone comes up with ideas about how the music should go, and we fight over it, and we say bad words and everything.
To answer your question about the symphony versus the orchestra, there's really not much difference. The symphony orchestra maybe is what you would consider the largest ensemble. That's where you're going to get a full complement of brass instruments and winds and percussion and a lot of strings. And then as the ensemble shrinks, that's when the name changes. So you might have a chamber orchestra, which will have fewer musicians, and then you get down to chamber music ensembles like string quartets and wind quintets and ensembles like that. So symphony and orchestra are mostly interchangeable. Orchestras play symphonic music.
So you guys have a little bit more free reign with that. I know I always preferred playing with smaller ensembles when I was in school. Is that y'all's preference too? Not to say that playing with an orchestra is terrible, but do you have a little bit more freedom with playing in a smaller ensemble?
Well,
Yes. I mean,
to me, it's a different type of job, or working in a different manner. But I love symphonic music. I mean, I love most of the big orchestral masterpieces, and I also love the chamber music. So we are kind of polyphacetic in this way.
I think
Go, Laura.
a big difference for us as musicians when we play for an orchestra, and the kind of sound and discipline in an orchestra, and when you play with a chamber group, it changes a little bit. You are one out of one of the instruments, the only one that is playing. So everything changes, especially dynamics and articulation, and everything has to be, I think is more difficult chamber as a musician.
And what I was going to say is the difference between Ivan and Laura and me is that as a clarinetist, Ivan gets to play solos. He gets the opportunity to shine during orchestra concerts. And Laura and I, when we play in sections, Laura's had principal experience, so she's probably gotten to do solos. I'm a section player, and I don't get that opportunity. And so this is an opportunity for me to say, hey, listen to what I can do when it's just me. So that's what I appreciate about chamber music. Orchestral music is great, but you have more opportunity to put your own personal stamp on chamber music.
For sure.
That's great. And then, so it's talking about, personal stamp and getting your selections. Do you guys select all the pieces yourself? What kind of selection process do you have? Do you get to do specific arrangements yourself, or do you just go through them and kind of figure out which ones you'd like?
So one of the interesting things about chamber music and the history of chamber music is that at the beginning, when chamber music first became a thing hundreds of years ago, frequently ensembles would play with whoever they had. So, you know, if you had a cellist and, you know, you had a harpsichord and you had, you know, certain instruments, frequently the chamber music would work around the ensemble that's playing it. And that's how a lot of pieces were written. And I think in a way we honor that today in Spectrum, because people can put together their own groups and they can decide what music they want to play. And on a single concert of Spectrum, we may have a piece for clarinet and piano, and then we have a piece for an octet of all strings, all in the same concert. And that's one of the things that's unique about Spectrum, is that we crowdsource the repertoire. We tell the musicians, I tell the musicians, come at me with what you want to do, and we end up with a very eclectic mix that surprises us as much as it surprises the audience a lot of the time.
And do you guys want to talk a little bit about your program for us on the 30th and the pieces that you have selected for us, and any kind of fun facts about them or the composers?
Dan?
Oh, sure. Well, we can. The first half of the concert is going to be all string quartet music, 2 violins, viola, and cello. And what we decided to do was to pick smaller pieces in duration and put them together instead of playing multi-movement pieces. And what came out of it, again, kind of accidentally, is that we are running the gamut between 3 centuries. We've got Mozart string quartet that was in the late 1700s. We've got a 1-movement, beautiful slow movement by a man by the name of Anton Webern, and that was written in the early 1900s. And then we're playing this other piece, Strum, which involves a lot of pizzicato and plucking the instrument, somewhat like a guitar. And that was written by a woman by the name of Jessie Montgomery just a few years ago. So we have the history of chamber music, in a sense, the history of the string quartet, but also we have 3 completely different moods that we're going to be striking during this concert. The Mozart, this Adagio and Fugue, is very serious and dramatic, and, you know, kind of angry almost. And then the Webern piece, this Langsamer Satz, slow movement, is about a man in love. He was in love. He was young and in love, and he wrote this piece, and you can hear it in the music. It's beautiful. It's unabashedly romantic. Really gorgeous music. And then Strum is just happy, dance-like music, again, with the strumming, like a guitar, like this or like this. And it's a completely different emotion than the other 2 pieces. So we have a really big variety in such a short amount of time. So.
And then we have the Webern Clarinet Quintet. This Clarinet Quintet was written around the beginning of the 19th century, and there was a guy called Henrik Bergman that was a very famous clarinetist, and he was an innovator on the instrument. He had a 10 keys instrument, whenever the other guys, they had 5 keys instruments. So he could do a lot more virtuosistic stuff than the other people. And Webern heard him and started composing a lot of literature for clarinet, exactly for him. He wrote the Clarinet Quintet, 1 concertino, 2 concertos, and even in the orchestral masterpieces that Webern wrote, the clarinet has has a very predominant role always. So it's all thanks to Berman. And the fun fact is that Berman used to play at the Munich Orchestra, Munich Court Orchestra, and his son played, whenever he retired, his son took his place in the same orchestra. Clarinet player too.
Now, one thing that I wanted to mention, and Ivan can talk about this a little if he wants to as well, is that that this piece is a lot more like a clarinet concerto than it is a chamber music piece. The role of the string quartet is more as an accompaniment to the soloist.
Well, before that, who wrote for another very famous composer who wrote for this same group, so for clarinet and string quartet, was Mozart. And he wrote this beautiful quintet, the K581, in which everybody has a predominant role and is more of a chamber music performance. In the clarinet quintet by Webern, the clarinet is it's very predominant, and I would say it's very well written, very virtuosistic, but at the same time, Webern would know very well how to write for a clarinet player. So again, it's thanks to these guys like Berman that we have now inspired composer that wrote for us.
That's amazing. That's really great insight. Thank you so much for that. So that kind of leads me to the next topic of one of the reasons that we're featuring you guys, other than, of course, your amazing talent and your outstanding performances, is that this month is, for September, it's National Classical Music Month. Classical music is just such a broad term to describe Western music, Western classic music, anything that's not modern. Do you guys want to go into that a little bit, what you kind of think about the term, its significance or its importance to music now that people might not realize?
Laura, you teach music appreciation.
Yeah, so the question is to talk about why it's called classical music, or the role that the music has nowadays.
Both work. So the broad term, if we kind of want to break it down, because there's like Baroque and there's a Romantic period and there's a classical period. There's so many periods that we have. Do you want to kind of, I guess, break that down for us a little bit, or talk about its importance or significance with us?
Yes, I mean, each period in music had a specific new things that brought into the musical world. Right? Before the Baroque, we had all this vocal music. The music was vocal, mainly the written music, right? And then the instruments enter at the end of the Renaissance as an accompaniment. And what Dan was saying, you play the music and the instruments that you had at your house. Yes, you should be able to read music and to play whatever you have, right? So that was the starting thing. Then the Baroque came and the instrumental music started to be considered as a genre, instrumental music, right? Mm-hmm. And the opera came also with the Baroque. So the orchestra that was formed in order to get into the opera and to build this huge artistic complex, opera has everything. Mm-hmm. Literature and all the art for the stage and all the mechanism and the dresses, the makeup, everything, right? Opera was like the big thing.
And the drama and the music, no? Right?
Yes, the literature and acting. And the orchestra was conformed there. So after that, the orchestra just expanded. And it was, for example, at the beginning, the oboes and trumpets and, was the most used instruments for the orchestra, because the instrument didn't have the keys, or
the clarinet was invented later.
Yes.
So 1690 or so. So
but invented or just developed?
Developed from the chalumeau, yes.
Through the time. And then we go into the classical period of music. That was when the symphony and the string quartet started to be the main genre the composers wanted to use as the new instrument, like when the piano came in the romantic and the
So you are saying that there were trends?
Yes, but we call classical music, I don't know, because if you ask people that are not musicians and you ask, do you know some composers? And there will go into Mozart, probably, and Beethoven. And they are classical music composers. And it's their work has been so well done and so inspirational and so into the next generations of composers that are still with us, no? The importance of those people. So calling classical music, yeah, when people say classical music, I always think, well, which century are you talking about? Yeah.
Big C versus little c. There it is. Big C versus little c.
Yes. It will be pretty much. And then all the instruments, we started with the string instruments in the Baroque. Then we add some little winds and the brass also. The horn was always there too. And then they start to build and develop those techniques and instruments, blah, blah, blah. When we get into the 20th century, we already did everything. So trumpet concertos and trombone concertos, blah, blah. And, well, trombone maybe 20th century is a good one. But then the percussion enters into when the composers just, okay, so now let's put some percussion in this. And money-wise also, the wars and everything deteriorated the funds. So chamber music again in the 20th century, the rebirth of the 20th century music was chamber, was little ensemble and weird ensembles, like the celesta and percussion and those Bartok pieces. And
also there was it was like every age of classical music, every period sort of rebelled against what was going on in the period before. And when you get to the 20th century, everything from the Romantic period in the 19th century had just ballooned. Everything was huge in scope and in the writing was just powerful. And there were 20th century composers who said, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's take this back a little bit and let's just shrink everything. And that corresponds to what Laura was saying, that now we're talking about maybe smaller ensembles again, because we're trying to get away from the excess that was going on in the 19th century.
And classical music is versus what? Versus modern music. Well, if you think about it, every piece was written, was modern at some point. Yes, so maybe in 200 years we will have a Shakira song considered as classical. I mean,
exactly. Everything has already kind of been done and happened, and you can't know what's new until you know what's old.
Yeah.
And I hate calling it old, but yeah, I mean, and that's why that was why it was kind of an important question for me, is just to kind of show how broad the term classical music is and how significant and important all those periods are. Do you guys have any personal favorite periods or composers that you would like to kind of, I guess, shout out for people to maybe go and listen to, aside from our Mozarts and our Beethovens?
Well,
Richard Strauss.
Brahms is the beginning of the Romantic period. I love Brahms.
I got one, maybe out of left field a little bit. I would say Shostakovich. because Dmitri Shostakovich was writing classical music under the thumb, under the watchful eye of Joseph Stalin in the early part of the 20th century, early into the middle. And the arts were, everything was very controlled by Stalin and his people. And Shostakovich was frequently at odds with Stalin because he strayed away from the nationalistic music that Stalin insisted upon, that he liked. And so what Shostakovich did was he found ways around it. He found ways to put irony into his music that Stalin would never have thought of. And then what's also interesting is that at a certain point in Shostakovich's career, Stalin dies, and now Shostakovich is more free to do what he wants. But he, like so many other Russians, were so affected by Stalin. It's all throughout his music. There's anger and there's desolation and isolation. And if you get a chance, string quartet wise, his string quartet number 8 is incredible. Read a little about it, because there's so much there's stuff in the music that you can tell what he wanted the music to portray. And it's very powerful music and beautiful at times as well. So he's a very interesting composer.
And I will add, because I'm the Latino here, the composers in Latin America, we have, there are many good names, like, for example, Piazzolla and all these folk elements that those composers have brought into the classical music. Villalobos or Piazzolla, or in Mexico, what's the name?
I don't know.
Okay, I will remember before we finish. And Colombia, of course, but.
And even after, we can always put a footnote that, this was the composer, we couldn't remember the name too. But that kind of leads into my next thing, is when we think classical music, we think Western music, Westernized music. But have you guys ever dabbled into anything Eastern or classical music for any other culture or region in particular?
Well, as I said, I have been in contact with this Latino.
I lived many years in South America, in Colombia, so yes, I have been in contact with these kind of composers that they bring a lot of the folk elements, dance elements into their music. I would say any composer brings, not any, but many composers. Shostakovich brought folk elements into his music. Prokofiev or Stravinsky at some point. Bartok,
All of them.
Khachaturian, I mean, all of them.
Did you know?
Look all these names up.
Yes. I was, yeah.
Yeah, all those names is
The nationalistic.
Yes, because sometimes we don't think about how the world has been going and how the music has been affected by it, or the opposite, right? How the music gets affected because the world we live, the politics, the religion, the everything. So it's very, very connected, especially when the countries started to form and all this. We are still there are wars still in some places for land, and I think that the patriotism in people is something that we born with. We're born.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's sometimes a way for people that are kind of giving back or kind of remembering where they come from, who they are. And there's a lot of those elements in a lot of music, and I think people don't realize that. But I, somebody who studied local music, and I was an ethnomusicologist, and so that was sort of my thing, was kind of finding out like where the roots were for some of these composers and musicians. And so I was just curious if you guys had dabbled in any of that. But kind of going back, a question that I did forget that somebody had asked was how you guys have adjusted your performances, your performance style during COVID and, you know, instead of doing live performances, maybe doing these virtual performances? Has it been difficult for you guys to do that?
We've got some challenges as chamber musicians that COVID has brought on. Chamber music is very intimate, much more so than orchestral music. And there's a connection that needs to be made between the musicians. And part of that connection is getting in real close. This, you know, frequently you can put the stands right by each other and you're sitting only a couple feet away from each other. And that allows you to have that intimacy that comes out in the performance. And we are attempting to do these performances with 6 feet in between us. And especially when you've got 5 instruments or more, which will be happening pretty soon. We're going to be doing 7 instruments on a Spectrum concert at the end of October. So that's a huge challenge. Not just because of the intimacy, but just logistically being able to hear each other and work off of each other, and sound delays and having to adjust to that. So those are definitely challenges in the age of COVID.
And even the playing without the public, without people listening to you,
Without an audience.
It's a different thing.
And I'm going to say something very girly, but see the face with the people you're playing. You know, we communicate with our eyes and with a smile, or, you know, it's like you are always playing with eyes there that you cannot express. You cannot understand what you are expressing only by looking at your eyes. You know, we have this big portal of things. For me,
and we will be wearing masks, except for Ivan. Ivan can't really play clarinet wearing masks.
Yeah. And that's okay. Our performance will have plenty of social distance and not a lot of people, which is why we're doing the live stream on the 30th. But do you guys have any other things you'd like to add, or any other, I know you guys are performing regularly or semi-regularly, any other performances you'd like to plug?
Well, Spectrum does usually, in the before times, as I like to call it, Spectrum did 6 concerts per season, a pair in the fall, a pair in the winter, and a pair in the spring. We normally play at a couple of churches, 2 different churches, First United Methodist Church of Fort Worth downtown, and First Jefferson Unitarian Church on the east side. We are hoping to continue to do that, only with live stream only for the time being. And so we will be playing at both those churches. At the end of October, we're celebrating Beethoven's 250th birthday, the anniversary of his birth. It's a pretty big deal. It would have continued to have been a big deal if COVID hadn't hit. There were all kinds of plans that various ensembles had to scrap. And so the 7-person piece, the 7-musician piece I was talking about, is a septet that was written by Beethoven that we'll be doing in honor of the anniversary of his birth.
Also, I'd like to add that we are back on stage with the Fort Worth Symphony. We just played our first pop concert with Asleep at the Wheel. This week we have a symphonic, our first symphonic. We changed the venue because Bass Hall is closed at least until December. So we are now playing at the Will Rogers Auditorium. But yes, we are back. So please come to see our concerts.
And also to talk about what we talked about earlier, the differences, the different kinds of music, symphonic, chamber music, etc. We've been forced to adapt because we have to stay apart from each other. We have to have social distance on stage. So the Fort Worth Symphony is basically playing chamber orchestra music instead of symphonic music. So if you are used to huge orchestras and a really big sound with lots of brass players, this is an opportunity for you to see and hear smaller, again, more intimate, even though there's still a number of people on the stage, but it's a smaller group, but it still has passion and excitement, and it's an opportunity to listen to music that you maybe wouldn't normally get to hear, because usually we're playing large Brahms symphonies and pieces like that. So this is a good opportunity to see and hear some smaller works.
That all sounds amazing and fantastic. And is this all online, or are you guys doing in person?
We are doing, yeah.
Okay.
Obviously,
Right.
there are some
Percentage
of chairs that are not occupied, there is no people in the sitting. So we are trying to follow the rules.
Sounds great.
For that.
Do you have
So if people want to find out more about Spectrum, our full name is Spectrum Chamber Music Society. And our website is at spectrumchambermusicsociety.com. That's a lot of letters. But anyway, we have information about our series and our history as well. And so you can check us out there, and we're on Facebook as well. And the Fort Worth Symphony, of course, has presence on social media and their own website. So definitely check those out.
We'll definitely check those out, and we'll promote those out to everybody. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for doing this with us. And I'm really, really looking forward to our live stream performance with you guys. And hopefully it turns out super awesome. I know it will, because you guys are pros and really amazing and super talented. So thank you guys so much. And I'll let you guys go. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. We really appreciate it.
today?
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.